Welcome to the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and leaders at B2B services, tech, and SaaS companies to learn the systems and processes they've used to create success for their business. We'll also learn from marketing and sales experts to provide insights to help you grow your business. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and the podcast is brought to you by Modern Revenue Strategies and their 10x ROI B2B Growth Guarantee. Schedule a free diagnostic call to learn the fastest path to double your B2B revenues in just 90 days. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Dan Balcauski. Now, Dan is the founder and chief pricing officer at Product Tranquility. They're based in Austin, Texas, and he focuses on helping high-volume B2B SaaS CEOs define pricing and packaging for new products. So, Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Good to be here.
So, you have such a really interesting area of expertise because, pricing and packaging is one of those really core fundamental things that is, key to success, especially as companies really start to gain traction in the marketplace, but so often overlooked. But I'm sure you didn't sort of, spring out of the womb with all this expertise. So why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of your journey of how you got to where you are today with Product Tranquility and what that path looked like?
Au contraire, as a toddler, very concerned with the price of the juice boxes in the grocery aisle. Now, I've been 20 years in the software space, started as an engineer, moved into engineering management, product management. Early on, noticed that a lot of tech companies, including those I work for, obsessed over building products and acquiring customers, but really neglected how they captured value. And this insight crystallized during an MBA internship at a successful Silicon Valley startup, where I got asked to look at a freemium project that was on the CEO's desk. And among several things I did that summer, through my research, I uncovered that popular pricing model only works in very specific and surprisingly rare circumstances. And today I help B2B SaaS CEOs transform pricing from a confusing liability into a strategic advantage, whether it's helping clients uncover millions in revenue through revenue leakage or helping them establish a pricing process that becomes their standard approach for future SaaS products and pricing.
Awesome. So so much stuff to dive into there. But I think it's valuable for our audience that maybe has never really thought about pricing other than, well, I sort of price to what the market will bear based on my knowledge of the space, or a price to cover my costs based on sort of time and materials, or maybe they've even sort of heard of the concept of I price based on, the value that I'm delivering. But give our audience a little bit of a primer of the way, sort of the most successful organizations think about pricing, specifically within, the way that they package and price and deliver their products and then make money.
Yeah, well, I think the first big misconception, when it comes to pricing, many executives think that what you charge determines your success. In fact, who and how you charge determines your success. So I know in that arc of your question that you just told,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, we should price to what the market will bear. That makes pricing very one-dimensional, where we know from our day-to-day lives, we see countless examples where highly disruptive firms completely changed what they're pricing on. So might be dating ourselves, but if we go back to the days of Blockbuster, you rent a movie, you get 2, 3 nights or 2, 3 days,
Right.
plus the late fees. When Netflix comes along, they say, hey, you could get 3 movies at a time, keep them for as long as you want. When you're done with those, send them back to us. We'll send you 3 more. So they completely changed the way that they were monetizing, that had nothing to do necessarily with the price point, but in how customers receive value. Because by enjoyment of that movie didn't change based upon how many days it was sitting on my shelf. In fact, that could be a negative consequence. 'Cause now I've got this ticking clock, and then I'm sure
Right.
there's somebody who's still got an old Blockbuster VHS set sitting on their shelf because they're afraid to go back and get charged all the late fees that they owed them.
That's right.
So that's really where the folks who really understand pricing well, which we spend a lot of our time on, is trying to figure out what are the ways that we charge it and who you charge. We all know that the value of a product changes depending upon our particular context.
Yeah.
Let's take the number one commodity ever, water. If you're on a road trip, you stop at a gas station, you want a bottle of water, I don't know, maybe you pay $2, $3, no
Yeah.
problem. That same bottle of water, if you'd been wandering through the Mojave for a week, you might be willing to pay me a couple orders of magnitude more than that for that bottle of water.
That's right.
Or if that water is bursting from a pipe in your house, it probably has negative value to you. You'd be willing to pay a lot of money for an experienced plumber to come clean it up.
Right.
And so that same product is very different depending upon the context and the customer situation that we're in. So those are the areas where I think there's a lot of untapped opportunity for folks who really want to explore the different possibilities of monetization.
So there's an old, analogy that, like Eskimos have 20 words for snow, or and I use the example of, although I lived in Florida, before I moved to California, I thought there were like two kinds of palm trees, but now I know there are hundreds of types of palm trees, and even ferns that look like palms. And you're sort of expanding my mind in the same way about thinking about all of these dimensions related to pricing.
No drugs required.
Which is why, expertise like yours is so valuable. But, maybe for some, product owners or business owners that are out there thinking about how do they even start to sort of organize this in their mind as they start to think like, where are there opportunities to improve their approach to pricing?
Mm. Well, it's a pretty broad question. So I think,
Yeah.
really depends upon, where are the opportunities that you see in your business?
Hmm.
One heavily overlooked area that I find myself running into with a lot of folks is like, what is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish here? Which is so obvious, but it often gets overlooked. Or if you find yourself in companies, everyone thinks that they know the goal, but then you go interview the CEO, the CRO, the CMO, the
Right.
CPO. They all give you a different answer of what the goal is, right? So it's
What are
aligning on what
different
the
goals that you see? Because the obvious answer is, well, to make as much money as possible. I think I know where you're going with this, but let's break that out. Like, what are different goals that folks might have that their pricing strategy might support?
Yeah, well, you may have what you might call like either category or P&L goals. So those would be like, hey, we want to increase market share. We want to increase top line revenue. That's big in the software world, which is where I predominantly play in B2B SaaS, because traditionally software has had a almost negligible marginal cost to serve. Server
Right,
storage and compute is pretty minimal. All you have large fixed costs of engineering talent, but then that software you just copy a million times. And then, so is it on the top line or is it on the bottom line? And those can all have trade-offs, right? If I'm trying to get market share versus I'm trying to maximize, revenue growth, or I'm trying to increase profitability, or a lot of times also in the public markets, you'll hear public market CEOs talk about rule of 40. A lot of Wall Street analysts will use that and chart how do these companies compare as a rule of 40. It's a blend of profit and revenue. And then you also have unit economic goals. So, am I trying to increase my customer lifetime value? Trying to increase my customer acquisition costs? Am I trying to grow my net revenue retention? So these are all, and that last one I mentioned, especially because I think that one is highly important for folks that are looking at their business metrics. We get a lot of play in the software world. If you're out of software, right, you have gross retention, which is, you have 100 customers at the beginning of the year, you have 80 customers at the end. Okay, what did that folks who were with you at the end, like, what were their sort of revenue versus where you started at? But that misses out companies who expand with you maybe grow through upgrade package size or increase the number of seats that they're using or whatnot. And that net revenue retention number, if it's not moving in the direction you'd like, is often pointing to a pricing and packaging issue because you're
Right.
not allowing customers to grow with you as they get more value out of the product.
Interesting. And so you juxtapose, making money up front versus making money over time, making money on the unit versus taking more share out of the marketplace. Um, how do you see, companies evaluate those different goals and then implement the right sort of pricing strategy to support them?
It could really differ, company to company, right? I spend a lot of time in like I said, the software space, and so usually it's some either blend of sort of accelerating top line revenue growth, increasing net revenue retention, potentially also looking at Rule of 40. If growth
Hmm.
stage software businesses aren't primarily focused with their gross or net profit numbers, or that obviously there's variability company to company, and so we want to look at, okay, do we have, where are the barriers to expansion? If we just look at something like net revenue retention, a lot of companies will have different offer configurations. The good, better, best is pretty common in the B2B software world. So go to any software page, you say, hey, this is the starter package, this is the team package, this is the pro package. And so we'll look at, okay, are most of your customers just in the starter? The the team and the pro haven't attracted the upsell. Is there a value mismatch there that you've put too much value in your entry level offer? Do you have a way for customers to expand with you within that starter package? So if I charge, say, per seat, very common if you're buying like a CRM, not always the
Right.
best measure, but we could leave that conversation aside for the moment. Is the seat the right metric for them to expand and stay within that set of capabilities that you've defined in the starter pack? So as we go from that top level or metric, we'll try to figure out what is the breakdown, what are the barriers that really drive that metric that we're not enabling in the way that we've priced and packaged. And yes, like of any of these situations, a net just jump 20% price increase could move that metric, but there's
Yeah.
often a lot more nuance to how you approach that type of decision. Does that help?
Yeah, for sure. And so, other than just, jumping up the price, how do you guide people in thinking through that nuance so that they're sort of making those right choices?
Yeah. So when companies, like I said, they start or they try to figure out this area, they often face a couple of big problems. So one, they don't know who their customers are. They don't know how their product helped customers. They can't explain why the product is special, and they forget that pricing is more than just picking a number. And so to solve this problem, I saw it so often. I ended up creating what I call my services model. SVCS acronym stand for Segment Value Competition Strategy. So let's break that down quickly. So the first three elements. So segments. So who are your customers? How are they different from each other? What do they
Yeah,
need? Right. I used that example before of you go to the gas station versus you walking through the Mojave.
right.
Very different, actually same identity, but different context. And that context tends to matter quite a bit
Yeah,
to how you perceive value. And that leads to the second part, which is V, value. Like, how does your product help customers? Why is it important to them? C, competition. What are the choices do they have? We often see that different customer segments, maybe there's an old joke in software that most SaaS just replaces interns and spreadsheets to a certain extent with most workflow software, right? So on the low end, maybe there is no direct sort of competitor on a Gartner Magic Quadrant or whatever that
or the
your folks are
substitute.
using, but those are relevant competitive alternatives. Maybe at the higher end for some of your larger customers or larger prospects, they're using a more entrenched, competitor that is purpose built for that solution, right? So, and that differential that differentiated value will be different for those customers. So those first three elements can be considered inputs to the overall pricing process because your pricing power ultimately comes from that differentiated value you create for a particular customer segment beyond those competitive alternatives that are available. So, and then those three elements filter down into the final piece, which is the final S strategy. So how will you sell your product to the right customers? So a strategy I use in the Michael Porter sense of the word, it's about making trade-offs. Like we can't make everyone happy, so we need to choose like which customers will we focus on, like how will we show that our product is the best choice, and how will we package and price it so make it easy for them to buy. So at the end of that, obviously we have to put a number on it, but it's about much more than picking that number and making those real definitive strategic trade-offs of these are the folks who we're best suited for. This is how our product delivers them differentiated value, and then making our offer in all of its entirety of price metric, price model, offer configuration, and ultimately the price to value that they're going to pay align with that.
Yeah. So, what are some of the um, there's so much here. I'm not even quite sure, where to go next, but thinking through from just sort of the mindset of, someone that has, built products and then, looked at sort of pricing them from a value perspective, but not necessarily segmenting before thinking about that value, and thinking about the context that they're in. And then, also that, sort of particular the strategy that you're, trying to achieve with that. I- it- for folks that, today are just sort of like, well, my strategy is to make more money. How do you guide them through thinking, well, what should your strategy be? In terms of should they be thinking about more retention and, longer lifetime value versus taking more share out of the marketplace? And I've got some models that I'm sort of bumping around in my head that I'll ask you about, but I want to sort of open it to you first if there's some sort of standard approaches there.
Well, maybe I'm lucky, but I rarely get such a blunt answer of folks coming to me and saying, "What do you want to accomplish?" Like, "I want to make more money."
Sure.
That's definitely part of the conversation, but there's often a few different ways we'll look at it. Right? There's some sort of challenge going on in the business.
Hmm.
There's some sort of outcome that they're looking to achieve, and that can, if we think about outcomes, I want to separate that from the KPIs that we were just talking about, right?
Okay.
So outcomes are, look, right now we have a set of four products that are completely independent of each other. It's causing our product team to optimize for their own little fiefdom.
Right.
So instead, what we want to do is combine those such that we can go to market with a combined offering and then have upgrade paths that make sense versus trying to put all of this sparse wood behind way too many arrows, right? We want to
Yeah.
consolidate that. Or we have really long sales cycles, and our sales folks have to have 3 to 7 calls just around pricing because it's so confusing, or it takes so the given the way that we price, we have to get to the very, very end of a long multi-month discovery process with very technical people before we can even give them a reliable quote because our pricing is so embedded to the way that they're going to deploy our technology. And
Hmm.
so we'll listen for those outcomes, right? That's usually where it starts. And then from there, okay, what is getting in the way? Like, what have you done to solve it? And we'll also talk about, okay, look, if we solve this, what would that do? Like, okay, are you trying to increase your customer LTV? Are you trying to increase win rate against some competitor? So
Right.
what we're trying to do is just decompose that into a little bit more of a structured process to try to understand what is getting in the way. Is it this price metric that they're using? Like, so we haven't gone through all the breakdowns of packaging. I hinted at a couple times. Price metric is simply the unit of value I charge the customer for. So is it per seat in that CRM example? Is it per
Right.
API call? If I go to McDonald's and buy a hamburger, it's per hamburger, right? That is the unit of transaction. I'm not paying per pickle on the hamburger or
Right.
per ounce that the cooked fine
Per
finished good.
calorie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
per calorie. Maybe it should be, right? We think about different ways to incentivize behavior. I mean, gym memberships do this, right? I mean, there's a lot of gym business models work on signing a bunch of people up in January who they know are not going to show up the rest of the year, and if they all do, they're going to be in trouble because there's not
That's
going to be
right.
any space on the machines, right? And so these could be very conscious decisions. Or you have other gyms who are like, we're going to charge you so much per month that it's going to hurt your soul if you're not here 5 times a week because the price
Right.
per, if you're only coming once a week, like your price per visit's going to be astronomical, and that's going to hurt, less than you actually coming to the gym and getting your workout in, right? So
That's right.
price is as a motivator for that. And so we want to look at what that particular situation is, right? Is it the fact that, hey, like customers aren't expanding with us, aren't growing with us, right? We don't have like they get stuck in our either lowest tier offer, or we should see more migrations, or they're not buying additional add-ons. And so what we're trying to look at is, are they, where in that situation are the levers that we can help move them. If that does that
Well,
help? I know, because we're talking like at a very high level too.
it does, but it also sort of like starts to suggest things like early stages of the market when you're trying to establish market dominance. You're better off, with a pricing structure that's less about maximizing the value per sale and more about maximizing your market share so that you can take more market share. And then as you establish yourself as the category leader or the dominant player, you can then start to drive up your margin on those sales. Likewise, businesses that are in, maybe preparing for a recapitalization or some sort of exit scenario, like to be able to demonstrate more recurring revenue and less customer concentration. So building lifetime value and maybe even building the lifetime value of their mid-tier customers helps to look like they have less concentration with their top customers and starts to look like they have more sort of revenue continuity, which makes the business more attractive to potential acquirers and things like that, which, essentially the same business could have different, sort of 5-year goals and would choose different pricing approaches based on that.
Yeah, that's 100%. And to a certain extent, the what you outlined at the beginning there was a lot of the venture funded playbook,
Yeah,
in those, especially consumer markets. B2B markets less so tend to be winner take all, just because businesses are savvy and they don't want anyone to own an entire market. And so
right,
even
right.
if you like, you get to Salesforce gets to a certain size and everyone's gonna be like, ooh, like
Yeah,
if everyone keeps giving them money, like they're going to be the only game in town, and then they're really going to get aggressive with us. So
right.
and not to pick on Salesforce, a great company, but you can pick any number one of those. That's the reason why there's three major cloud providers, right? There's almost three major players for B2B across every industry, but in consumer, almost certainly, right? And that's a lot of that of like, that was why we all were beneficiaries of VC subsidized ride sharing for
That's right.
about 10 years, 2010 to 2020, because the VCs all thought, either Uber or Lyft is going to win. It's going to be winner take all, and we're going to funnel billions and billions of dollars into, just attracting, the
The R
most
bet. Yeah.
people on, and there's network effects in those businesses. That logic does break down a bit on B2B. I won't go into my freemium rant here. I've covered it elsewhere. I'm happy to if you want, but like freemium, as I hinted in my intro, is one of these areas that I think in B2C can make sense when you have very, very large TAMs of potential users, and very, very low marginal cost to serve. In B2B, those tend to not work as well, and I generally recommend folks steer away from them. But I think the other thing you're pointing out is just different growth stages merit different approaches to this topic.
Uh-huh.
So, if I'm early stage company, so say sub 10, sub 20 million in revenue, my biggest problem is not pricing and packaging. It's, does the thing I am creating create value for others? Does it actually solve the problem? And then usually the next question is about distribution. Like, okay, I've closed 10 accounts and they're really happy. How do I go find 10 more of those folks in a repeatable fashion that doesn't cost me my entire bank account to go acquire the next 100, right?
Right.
Because I need to be able to build that, revenue flywheel. So at that point, it's really about, keeping pricing simple. I highly recommend you charge something. Value is the pleasure, price is the pain. You're not really getting valid market feedback if you're giving something away, but keeping it simple so you're not adding friction to the process. You'll focus on creating, communicating, and delivering that value. Continue to sort of test and learn. As you get into the growth stage, this is where your pricing and packaging becomes much more of a lever. Right? You can implement a more sort of formal process where you're running more elaborate experiments, research, doing more advanced market segmentation. Look, you're an early stage company, you got 10 customers. You could go run market study if you have 10 customers and get a market segmentation, but you're going to be missing like, okay, what do we know about the people who we've acquired versus what's out there in the market, right? So you probably have you're going to have a learning journey along the way. Then you also have a more mature product at a growth stage. That's where it then makes sense to really start focusing on creating additional tiers and add-ons. That's another area where, I've had plenty of conversations with prospects where they'll say something along the lines of, "Hey, like we kind of have an all-in-one offer. That's how we started.
Yeah.
Customers loved it. They kept on asking us for more. We kept on delivering more. All of a sudden, we wake up one day and we're spread across four different Gartner categories
Right.
because we've grown this single offer beyond that, and now we have to really think about dividing it up much more intelligently. And things like bringing in add-ons, getting much more intentional about what those should be. You don't want to make those decisions too early at the beginning. Definitely recommend you have a segmented offer, at
Mhm.
least two packages. I see
Yeah.
early stage customer companies try to pretend like they're late stage by creating three or four, but it's like you're taking like a little tiny pie. If I gave you a muffin and you try to slice it into four things, you're like, like here, well this, you're like, well that's not really incrementally enough for me to
Right.
really care. And so the product maturity gets larger, or the surface area gets larger of the product. All of a sudden, okay, now there's ways to really think about, okay, slicing this up in a clean way such that these align to the different customer segments. And then you get to maturity stage. You're at Salesforce of the world. You're at Coca-Cola or JP Morgan stage. You've run through so many pricing processes. At this point, it's about like, can we eke another 0.5% of
Right.
EBITDA out of tuning our pricing, right?
Right.
And then you have different challenges, right? So at the early stage, it's all wins all day, but you don't have as much surface area. At the other side, you got the wins are much harder to come by, but then you have also a bunch of risk from irritating all your existing customers when you go make make a change. So
Right.
there's no perfect world. It depends on what stage you're in.
So interesting. So, Dan, you've really done a great job of, as I said, expanding my mind, and I'm sure our audience as well, and the way that they think about, how they get strategic about the pricing and the segmenting those different customers, thinking about the value they're delivering in the context that those customers are operating in. So, you're such an expert. We could spend all day exploring some of these topics, but I got to be mindful of your time. But before I let you go, like, give us the pitch a little bit. Like, what kind of companies do you work with to untangle these problems for them, and what are the types of things that you help them do?
Yeah, so well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Mark. Happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. So
Yeah.
just let me know you heard me on the podcast. Um, and we, like, as I mentioned at the top of the show, focus on B2B SaaS companies, and anything from usually what's happened at that sort of growth stage is there's usually a transition where the company has now often become, if not only multi-tier but potentially multi-product,
Hmm.
either organically or inorganically, and that requires a reimagining of how they're coming to market with pricing and packaging.
Hmm.
to sell things seamlessly. So oftentimes, that's a big problem, or they've grown beyond their initial customer segments, such that the new segments they're serving, the way that they had price and value aligned for their original customers doesn't align with the new customers that they're trying to acquire. So we'll help them work through that and work on both an advisory basis as well as helping them in the weeds, building out the hypotheses, doing research, bring that back in, helping them refine the hypotheses in order to get a new pricing and packaging into the market.
Fantastic. Well, Dan, Product Tranquility, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too, Mark. Thank you.
All right, talk to you soon. Thank you for joining this episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast. We hope you've gained insights to grow your business. If you enjoyed this discussion, please rate, comment, like on your favorite platform, and share to others who will find it useful. Do you know a CEO, founder, or leader at an early stage B2B services, tech, or SaaS company who would like to be a guest and share their story? Send us a note. Let's schedule a conversation.